Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Digital Adoption Show. This is the podcast where we bring together leading voices from L&D, HR, and tech to explore what's in the future of work in tech. Today, we are thrilled to host a panel of experts who will share their valuable experiences and insights. Our first guest on the list is Sally Loftis, a distinguished human resource consultant with a focus on organizational development and social justice. Sally is the founder of Loftis Partners, where she works on issues like pay equity, appreciative inquiry, and leveraging human strengths to build healthy organizational cultures. With experience across Fortune 500 companies, nonprofits, and more, Sally has made a lasting impact on organizations worldwide. She's also a sought after speaker on pay transparency and systemic inequality. My first question to you, Sally, today is given the ongoing debate about whether the hybrid work model is here to stay or just a temporary trend, what do you see as the key benefits for organizations adopting a hybrid model? Additionally, what are some of the most common challenges faced when managing hybrid teams, and how can these be effectively addressed?
You really need to think of it as a framework and a strategy around talent, the people who work there, and you're doing hybrid because it's a benefit to your employees. And so how you administer and manage in a hybrid world is very different because it's not the same as if somebody's sitting in the office next to you. And even as you have people who sit in the office next to you, if you're in there, and people virtually that may be states or countries away, you can't use a one size fits all supervisory approach. So you've got to figure out what that looks like so that you're still promoting kind of equality in those practices. Example being the person in the office is not necessarily getting more access to senior leaders than hybrid people. I think also from an organizational standpoint, you have to really think through how you gather and communicate with staff. So there are some, for instance, there are some organizations who do like a hybrid model, and it may be that, using the United States example, everybody's hybrid, but they have to live within maybe a 100-mile radius of the headquarters, and they fly everybody in once a quarter for an event or something like that. So there's a lot of different flavors out there of the hybrid model, and you've got to figure out what works and that it is an approach for keeping talent. The challenges on the flip side are when you don't have a strategy. So it's really, I see more exclusion, which would lead to a lack of employee engagement whenever hybrid models are not managed well. Yeah, a couple of things I would throw out there is one is how whoever is the team leader or supervisor, how you manage people. It's really important. They say about 30% of your time should be spent kind of managing people. And a lot of times you're like, wow, that's a lot. That's like 12 hours a week, right? And you don't want to be a micromanager. But what does that look like? It looks like checking in with people one-on-one, building connection. You have to be a lot more explicit in building connection and team building these days. Having meetings with your employees and hearing about what's going on, and having meetings where you can surface issues, challenges, successes so that you can perform better as a team. So those are a couple of things. Every organization has team metrics that are
Right.
different. I think if I'm leading a hybrid work, a hybrid team, one is, are people staying, are people able to complete their work? Am I seeing collaboration happening between my team, like building relationships between the team? How is the team operating outside of our group, like with other departments, things like that? I think it's really about focusing more on team performance than individual performance at that standpoint. And then kind of, so those are some of the leading indicators. I think lagging indicators are people staying in their jobs? What are they saying in employee feedback? Are they happy with the jobs they are doing? Do they understand how to do their work and do it well? Are there opportunities to grow? Those are some of the more lagging indicators.
Those were some amazing insights on how to thrive in a hybrid work model. And my next question to you, Sally, is given the challenges of maintaining effective communication and fostering a cohesive company culture in a hybrid work environment, what strategies can HR leaders implement to build a strong organizational cultures while minimizing conflict? How crucial is company culture to the success of hybrid teams? Additionally, what specific training and new skills should managers develop to effectively lead hybrid teams? And how does managing a hybrid team differ from leading traditional in office teams?
When we talk about organizational culture, I typically use Edgar Schein's definition, which is around kind of artifacts, underlying assumptions, and espousing values. So artifacts being like, what can you see and hear and experience with your five senses? So if I walk into your office space, what am I going to learn about the organization from that? Or if I observe a team working together, what am I going to learn by being in person with that group or in a hybrid meeting? Espouse values are typically whatever the core values are of the organization or basic behaviors. What do we say, who we are, and how we act and how we show up to work? I work with a lot of organizations right now on updating that because typically those are laid out more often as like a set of core values, but like in the employee handbook, it's typically like code of conduct. Here are all the things you could do to get fired. Typically, I'm working with clients to, if we're working on handbooks, updating with things like how we show up. These are the positive behaviors. This is what this looks like, not just the negative behaviors. And so making sure that aligns with what those values are. And then the underlying assumptions are really the things that are not said, but that happen. You work for Whatfix when this happens, right? This is a organization meeting when this happens. So really that's the deeper work in the culture, and that's the stuff that's happening between people and on teams and between teams. And that's why building connection and trust is so important, because to your point earlier around dissent, conflict is you're able to call out and be like, this is what we say, but this is not what we're doing. And it's not a huge personal thing, right? So culture is built of those, and it's not just something you build and let go. Culture is continuously something you're monitoring, you're building. It's changing because the people who work there are changing in and out, and also how the organization evolves over time is changing. So it's very much a living organism that needs to be nurtured. Then the nature of the supervisor position is changing. I actually wrote something recently about like the supervisor unicorn, right? Does that exist? Because how we manage now is very different than 5 years ago. And when you throw it into a hybrid environment, again, it gets a little more complex, right? Because you do have people, you may be in the same office as some other people, you may not, there's a lot of different ways. So I think the couple of things, this is not necessarily a training thing, but I think managers need to just check their assumptions of what they think people know and expect at work, and then try to just be very explicit with your expectations. Like the team agreements, or like maybe a one pager on, when you're working for me, these are kind of my things I expect from people, that reaffirm maybe some things that are in the handbook, or reaffirm the culture of the organization, or reaffirm just specifically that supervisor's, particular way of leading. The training, I think, is really important right now for supervisors, which I don't think is a traditional training that they receive, is facilitation. Because whenever you are looking at facilitating a team where you're trying to build autonomy and trust, it means you have less control over the meeting. So you're really facilitating a group dialogue. And your role is kind of building a container where people can have the conversations that are needed to move their work forward. And that is a different skill than kind of the traditional command and control, like, vision of leadership that's been in the past of like, I tell you what to do, I lead every meeting, and you go do it. Facilitation really opens up more of a group experience that people are craving right now.
Thank you for sharing those valuable insights with us, Sally. Our next guest in the panel is Cammy Bean. Cammy Bean, the accidental instructional designer herself. Cammy is the author of the acclaimed book, The Accidental Instructional Designer Learning Design for the Digital Age, first published in 2014 and updated in 2023. Her journey began as a junior instructional designer in 1996, well before e learning was even a thing. And since then, she's worked with hundreds of organizations to design and deliver effective training programs. From small startups to boutique e-learning shops and freelance work, Cammie has done it all. Cammie's background in English and German studies has given her a unique ability to simplify complex concepts. She played a pivotal role in establishing the US operations for Kenyo, a global provider of learning solutions, where she now serves as a senior solutions consultant. In this role, she leads the North American sales team, supports clients through the discovery phase, and helps organizations create custom learning solutions to meet their strategic business goals. Cammie, you mentioned the importance of understanding the bigger picture before diving into instructional design. With that in mind, my first question to you is, what are the key skills and knowledge areas aspiring instructional designers should focus on and specialize in to be well prepared for the success in this field?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell you what anyone should do because, again, this is such a wide, varied field. I will put it in the framework of a pie. So I talk about this in the book, but really thinking about the core skills and areas that we need to master, not necessarily master at first, but to have some awareness of and knowledge. So one is learning and pedagogy, understanding how people learn. This is, adults, how adults learn, how to define a right instructional strategy, curriculum design, assessments, writing. This is learning science stuff. And that could be, you could get a PhD in learning science, and that could be your sweet spot. That could be your area of focus. However, with training, that's not the only thing. We also have to think about the creative element. I mean, you talked about this just with software stuff. Like, are we going to put pictures? How are we going to engage people? How are we going to tell stories? How are we going to ensure that the content is truly relevant and meaningful to people? It's not just a list of Bloom's taxonomy instructional objectives that we're trying to force down people. We want it to hook them and engage them, and that is often through the more creative elements. Visual design, really important in digital learning, making sure it's on brand, looks good, because that creates credibility for an experience. If you're doing game design or video production or audio production, those are all skills that you could master. The third piece of the pie is the technology piece, which really could be huge. That could be understanding an LMS, it's SCORM, it's QA testing, it's XAPI, if that's your thing. It's all the business technologies that go into creating digital learning or supporting classroom learning too. Nothing is without digital these days. That's just a factor of our life. So you could go really deep into the technology piece of the pie. The fourth piece of the pie is about business skills. So being a consultant, working with your parts of the business, understanding the business objectives. You might have to be a project manager. You might have to manage a project on time and on budget, performance consulting skills. It goes on and on, right? There are so many skills in all of this. So what I encourage people is to understand that big picture. This is the elephant. So understanding the elephant or the pie, all those pieces that are out there. You might have a sweet spot that really pulls you in that you want to focus on. That's super important. For me, it was writing. That's what pulled me into the field and finding that creative element. And, I still hold on to that very strongly. Over the last 30 years, though, I've broadened and I've started learning more about this whole pie. So I think, I'm 30 years into this. I have a lot of knowledge and experience. So find what your sweet spot is, develop that skill, hone that skill, but also get to know the bigger picture. Don't feel like you have to be an expert in all of those things, though, because you can't. It's too many skills. It's too much, right? So yeah, find your sweet spot, understand what your weaknesses are, explore those, grow in those areas, and find your path forward, because there are many paths in this space. For years, like the technology piece of the pie, I honestly stuck my fingers in my ears and I was like, I don't want to know about an LMS. I don't want to understand what that is. I don't want to know about SCORM really. I'll let my technical people deal with that. And then I started selling an LMS. And I had to take my fingers out of my ears and really start to pay attention and understand that technical piece much more than I had ever wanted to. So you're going to find your blind spots. So I think over time I've realized I've had to learn more about that. And as we get into, XAPI or data and analytics or AI, right? All these technology tools that get added into the mix. Don't feel like you have to be an expert in all of these areas, because that's not possible. It's just too much. But if you're working on a team, you might look at who is on your team, and for training managers out there who are high on that development team, ensure that you have a broad representation of skills from all areas of the pie so that you can have that more holistic view. You've got people who can do the consulting, you've got people who can do that creative aspect to understand the technology, who've got the learning sciences. So it doesn't have to always be on one person's head. I do think it's important for an individual working in this space, though, to have that broad view, at least to know what's out there. You can become a generalist and know a lot about a little, right? That's okay too, but have your deeper areas of expertise as well.
Amazing. My next question is, personalized learning pathways are becoming a prominent trend in instructional design. Now, how do you see, Cammie, them enhancing the learning experience, and what are some of the effective strategies for implementing them to maximize their impact?
People are time poor, we're busy, we're easily distracted. Nobody really wants to take your 30-minute e-learning course if they can help it, right? A lot of people think this stuff is really boring. So ensuring that we're designing effective experiences, that we're designing experiences that are relevant to the adult learner and are going to be useful to them at that moment of need is really essential. We don't want to waste people's time. And I think personalized learning pathways can be a really effective way to do that. So you can have an LMS or some kind of an algorithm on the back end that's mapping skills to what people need to learn and know and make those recommendations. This is where you may need a team of people who understand the broader technical stuff. It's not something that one person can implement for sure. And ultimately, if what we're feeding people is relevant to their job so that they can perform and develop their own careers better and build the skills that they need to, then people will be happy to consume the content that's out there. You can sit down and watch a 3-hour movie if it's really good, right? We do have that ability to focus, but when we're on the job and working, I don't know. Yeah, I ain't got time for training. I just need to do my job. So how are we going to ensure that people have the tools that they need to perform successfully? And that's truly the challenge.
Thanks for sharing with us some incredible insights, Cammie. Our final guest in the panel is Rob Lauber. Rob is a true luminary in the world of learning and development. He's the founder of Excello Global, where he helps learning teams drive great business value. With over 30 years of experience in L&D, Rob has shaped learning strategies for major companies like McDonald's and Yum brands, and has served as an advisor to numerous organizations. He's also held the role of chair of board of directors for the Association for Talent Development, showcasing his deep commitment to advancing the field. Rob's approach blends strategic vision with practical solutions, focusing on leveraging learning technologies and driving functional transformation to deliver real business impact. Rob, I wish to ask you this. In today's fast paced world where people expect instant access to information, whether through short videos, Google, or tools like ChatGPT, how do you think this shift towards instant gratification is impacting the way we approach learning and development? And from your experience as a strategic advisor to organizations like Cognita and others, what challenges have these companies faced in adapting to this new reality, and how have you helped them navigate those challenges?
Yeah, it's been coming on, right? If you think about like microlearning's been a conversation for 4 or 5 years. Again, not really a new idea, right? People just started paying attention to the fact that no one's watching their 30-minute videos, right? And so I need to now do 10 3-minute videos instead of one 30-minute video, right? And learners want the 15 seconds in that 30-minute video that matters to them to solve a particular problem. So I think that this whole idea is not really something new, right? It's just the next generation of really unlocking what people want. And that is, you can't possibly remember everything that you need to do a job, because some things happen infrequently. So how do you then retrieve the answer with the least amount of effort possible, right, to solve a particular problem and keep moving forward? That's what people want. And I think tools like ChatGPT potentially, I wouldn't say do it yet, but I'd say potentially open the door to a realm of possibility where that becomes much simpler. I think, talking about sort of what I do, I think one of the big challenges in the supplier community right now is getting people's time, right? So when there's disruption, I'm trying to do my job, and there's a lot of noise in the system at the same time. So So my ability as a chief learning officer to pay attention to Whatfix calling me out of the blue is very small, right? And so that becomes very challenging to many, particularly startup and early stage companies that don't have big brands, those kind of things. So what I've been trying to do is help them understand what's going on in the world of the chief learning officer or the potential buyer that they're trying to sell to. So what is an instructional designer's life like? What are they feeling, seeing, thinking right now? What's the corporate environment like? What's the budget cycles look? How do decisions get made? Those kind of things. So I spend much of my advisory time working with organizations around understanding those pieces, which helps them in turn sort of hone their sales deck, think about their marketing approaches, figure out the right places to be where they have the best chance of capturing someone's attention. Those types of pieces have really been where I've been advising a lot of these different companies.
Right. One of the biggest challenges in learning and development is justifying the ROI on these investments. From your experience, how do you approach demonstrating the tangible, quantifiable impact of L&D initiatives, and what metrics do you find the most effective in showcasing their value?
Yeah, two things I'd say. Like, I actually pay a very little attention to ROI, which sounds kind of heretic to people that might be listening to this because I care about ROI, but I don't pay a lot of attention to like the rigor of ROI because sometimes doing the ROI costs more than the actual ROI of whatever it is that you did. So I think there's a couple things that I do up front which aren't inconsistent with people that spend their time around ROI a lot, focus on. One of them is I focus a lot on defining success measures up front. Before I create anything, before I go off and sort of build something or whatever it might be, I work pretty hard with my clients to really understand what's the problem that we're trying to solve, right? And most importantly, what does success actually look like? And sometimes that's numerically, so it means sales goes up by 5%. Sometimes it's intangible, like something I want people to feel or something, words I want to hear people saying or behaviors I want to see in people. Like a lot of leadership development is really about behaviors I want to see more than sort of metrics I expect to improve, right? That's sort of the next, tangentially over on that. So getting really clear with stakeholders up front about what success looks like and whether data to prove that even exists is super important. Because I think if you know what how your stakeholder will view what you do as success before you've built it, then you can build to make sure that it shows that success. Or you're going to make choices around things that you can or can't do that are going to show that success, right? So I've had situations where people have laid out issues for me, and we've talked about how do we measure success, and I've sat there and said, gosh, this is probably, my head, this is probably going to be pretty hard to prove. And instead, I propose that we experiment. So let's run a test before we make the huge investment, right? Let's pilot in a particular place or geography or, one or two locations and see what the feedback, the reaction, and the results might be. And does it appear that we're going to have a high probability of getting the success measures that we've talked about, right? Because sometimes it's not possible. And it's better to do where you feel your probability might be lower than average. It's a safe place to try and experiment first, test and learn, right? And learn together with your stakeholder, because you might open the eyes of your stakeholder and they realize that actually it's a completely different problem than an L&D problem. It might be a compensation problem. It might be a procedural problem. It might be an equipment problem. It could be lots of other things, that are going on. So I think that's a pretty important piece around the framework of ROI that I think about. It's sort of, how do we define success? Okay, let's do this. And now let's make sure that we're actually seeing that success or what that success looks like on the back end. And sometimes that's ROI, and sometimes that's just, ROE, which I call return on expectations, right? Which is really that we're clear on what it is that we expect to happen after we do something. So I think that's how I think about ROI. I think that's a surefire way to never be sitting in a meeting with an executive team and have somebody say to you, that's all great, but what's the ROI on that? Which is code for saying, I don't see that adds any value to the business. And two things happen when that happens, because someone will always do that anyway. Your stakeholder will speak up and answer the question for you, right? Which is always good. or you have a lot of ammunition by saying, well, these are the success measures that we defined up front, and here's what we see on the back end, right? And that usually shuts it down. So you can handle the skeptics' questions pretty easily without having to hire Accenture or some professional services firm to do some complicated ROI for you. Because sometimes you don't need that. Most times, very few times, you actually need that.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks to all our guests for today. It was a knowledge-packed episode. Thank you to all for listening. And we promise to bring you fresh perspectives every week on the Digital Option Show. You can also listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and more. Stay tuned for more exciting episodes to come. Like, share, subscribe for similar content. And any questions, please do leave it in the comment section below. Thank you for joining us today, and have an amazing day.